Okay, we're going to part two of Osiris Gnosis, and I don't know what I'm going to name this thing off of it, but if you haven't seen part one, you can go to the very end of this one, and I'll put part one in the top left-hand corner. This should only be a two-parter at most, and at the end of that one, you can click in your top left-hand corner, and it'll send you to this one, as all my videos carry so. Anyhow, so we've been talking about this, and connections with Osiris, but actual sun gods. And even though these whole hierarchies get built in mythologies, over time they take a different seat almost in this ideal, in this fact of an underworld situation whenever you used to actually be a sun god, but then the sun goes to the underworld, so then you're the one that's doing it whenever they're doing this, and that's the yin and yang, and all these things seem to come out of it. I always tell you what I liked about the ancient Egyptians is they still have some animism aspects off of it, but it's all but lost. But then you can still see the effigies and the situation that goes on there, and how it breaks down and becomes hundreds of gods eventually. But a lot of those aren't mentioned in earliest times. Let's go ahead and get into this here, because this shows it with another one that I helped get into quite a bit, was the ancient Canaanites, as the Phoenicians, and their worship of Baal, and of Baal worship in the Bible. So let's get into that here. Baal, the sun god, yeah, we'll get back into that in a minute, because you know him as a thunder god, but we'll get into that. Is he synonymous with Osiris? And that was the earliest known object of worship with primitive man. So in later complicated mythology of the Greeks and Romans, Saturn, the same deity, has his place at the end of a dim vista of the generations of the gods. He's lost back in the Titanomachy, right? Titans and all that. As the first ruler, though, the direct offspring of Kalos and Terra are of heaven and earth, or Gaia, through which his later worshippers, he had lost his identity with early sun god, having been long succeeded in that character by his grandson, the Grecian Apollo. And this kind of rolls everything a little full circle for me. Every time we bring up Apollo, it kind of does, because that was the first little spark of Greek mythology and mythology in general, and led me to the long road I've been on ever since in my life. For I was a kid of the space program, and Apollo came out and everything, and they were doing the Apollo program, and there was the moon, and they had a picture of Apollo and the eagle landing in the crest and things, and it was like on uh, Reader's Digest, and I asked my mom about it and everything, and this is right at the time when she taught me how to write my name and stuff like this. And this Apollo was an old sun god of this, and I asked her, like the god we go to worship at Sunday, and she goes, well, no, it's the Greeks and this, that, and the other. And I asked her if he was real, and so then I get lost in this Greek situation, and she had a actual Greek book and stuff. And one thing I haven't told people is, shortly after that, like, my dad was gone TDY in the service, and he was coming back, and he heard that I was starting to read, and she was reading me books, and like Hop on Pop and crap. And so when he showed up, he grabbed one of the books, and he says, here, because everybody was trying to get his attention, and in my little turn there, one of the things he did was, okay, read this book to me. And I was just reading away the book. And so he said, he's got this memorized, right? And she goes, no, not really. He knows all the words. Here. And she reached over and she grabbed Reader's Digest and flipped it at him. And she goes, open that up to something. And so he flipped open to one of their articles and stuff, and he goes, here, try to read this to me and everything. And I read it, although I mispronounced a couple of the words. I pretty much read it through, and they were amazed and ha ha ha. And I was the big kid that was so little, because I was the youngest, and stuff. And it made me feel good, at least, and everything. And I was in advanced studies when I was a kid and stuff like that, but we don't get into bullshit like that. But here we're seeing a theogony that goes through where you have a sun god and his children and aspects of what happens to them all and everything that comes from it. And then because he's put in a back seat and effectively gone, castrated, dead, whatever you want to go with, it ends up re-showing itself again as a grandson. Through these people and their aspects, it reforms that same situation, if you follow me. So like a tree, it vibrates, but then boom, where those meet, and it's the aspects that most make him up, which are the part of aspects of the cosmos that started him off in the first place. And it started Baal, the sun god, and he's synonymous with Osiris. Well, yeah, the aspects work out the same, but he's a storm god, and Osiris isn't a storm god. Well, he does reveal and fulfill the same role, but he isn't associated with lightning and so on as all the other storm gods are, because there aren't rainstorms in Egypt. So he fills that role somewhat, but then also Baal's father was the sun god and the storm and everything in El. And so whenever he takes over and goes through their theogony and the Baal cycle, they talk it, he pretty much steals his father's power and becomes the sun god, goes through an ideal that, like you hear about stealing the chariot of the gods and so on like that. He goes through this situation. He kills the god of the death and everything like that. So it recreates that, but then he dies, right? Well, yeah, but then he's reborn and it goes on again. And so here we have that Jesus thing and everything else too. And Jesus is also a sun god. To give a quick one to you, it's not so quick, but it goes in depth enough to understand it, hopefully. The ancient Sumerians designated the circle of the earth and the circle of any circle as 360 degrees. And it's the same for a ball as the same as it is for a circle. Ball. And so the sun, and the reason they gave 360 degrees to it is it all works with cosmos. And the sun and sun worship for the ancient Sumerians figured out that the sun, from the longest day till winter happens, or reverse back the other way, by the way, after the winter solstice, falls 1 degree per day, all the way down, till it reaches a constellation we know of as the Southern Cross, on or near the Southern Cross, and it stays still for 3 days, and then it starts coming back up, and this happens on December 21st, and then 3 days later, December 25th, it starts rising again and save us all from an ice age like we went through from before. And so the Son of God died on the cross, and 3 days later he rose again to save everybody, and da-da-da. Yeah, I know they've got a little twisted with the birth and everything, and da-da-da. Spring, though, but spring is the equinox where the amount of darkness of winter, because they say the longest day of the year, well, there's the shortest day of the year too, and it starts to come back. And where it defeats those 2 points is at the spring equinox, whenever lightness takes over dark, and it wins, and it goes over. So it's all worked on that type of theogony, but you see it roll around with these, but also with other theogonies, as long as they're not still alive or in effect, where somebody is going to get pulled back open again, because we see also later there's Helios, right? And Sol Invictus, and this is the unconquerable, undying sun god, and that is Mithra, and that exactly exemplifies, there's your Jesus character. And everybody had one, except for some people. Hint, hint, knock on wood. So when we look at that, this is the earth and the cosmos created life on earth. It goes through a phase like, the dinosaurs, and then it gets killed off, and then these, which are titans, I guess, and it relates into these people from a time from before, and makes them into giants, if you will. And someone doesn't have to be necessarily so tall as to be a giant, but I flip-flop on somebody being a giant compared to other people's size versus them saying some guy's 20 foot tall, 32, anything else. We've even found that the original telling of Goliath says he's like 6'9". I have a friend I know is 6'9", and of course we used to make fun of him, say Cro-Mag and everything, and that's really just about truth, that there were a strain of Cro-Mags that were huge like that. When they run into other people that are not much over 5 foot tall, they were freaking giants, you know, and it starts to look like that Viking giant situation, and that's where a lot of that comes from. And we've talked recently about all from the Northwest and European and stuff, and where these fairy people come from in Tuatha Danann, Tuatha Danann and the Danites, and where you see Danes and Denmark and all this type of stuff come out of it, and migrations, if you will, and resettling of people. But in Egypt, you'll notice that in the New Kingdom, the aspects of Osiris and Isis as fertility gods, a rebirth or fertility god, was increasingly emphasized. And that's perhaps because of after being reinforced with the Hyksos that had come into there. And they became more concerned with the world of the living in addition to the underworld, for they were pretty much like a dead cult. Osiris was now associated with both the sun and the moon, as well as with the star Orion. And this was written by Diodorus Siculus way back when. And this was derived out of what Diodorus Siculus said in a commentary by Anne Burton. And it doesn't give a date onto it, but of course this is from Diodorus' ideals of what had happened, or that there was this rebirth of an idea that goes with it. You could say this, but we know that the shafts in the pyramids now, they line up. And they didn't know that at the time of this Anne Burton in these 1800s, of course, that they actually do line up with Orion and Sirius, and here's this and that, and the other hookups that go with this. So that gives it a whole nother idea. And of course, Arian, Orion, the hunter, works quite well with this situation too. The Nile was called by many names of the sun, as Milo, Yarrow, Oceanus even, Sirius, or Ausar, and Osiris. And this is by Vestiges of Spirit of Histories of Man, Samuel Phelps, Dunlap, in 1858. The Nile, though, Nilus, was a Greek river god, and they called the Nile the river Ar, A-R or A-U-R, and this works with Ausar and the shining, or the river of gold. And was it gold? Well, in a way it was fertilizing their lands and making it all happen every year. And it worked with the Osiris myth and the idea of him being the darkness of shadow of the sun coming around, and the dark soil that worked with it. So everything just clicked pretty good, didn't it? Well, they got that going in about the 5th dynasty, though, guys. That's whenever they really kicked in with that idea. And it looks like that they had that, at certain times. Some of these gods they had them extremely old, in fact, pre-dynastic, like Hathor, of course, and having some cattle and stuff. But they actually had Hathor. You can find her on the Narmer palette, the thing that looks like an arrowhead, if you look at it and check it out. But the little points of the arrowhead, what you would tie it to the stick with, are actually Hathor heads, this cow goddess situation. So some of these come from the earliest of times and built up the theogony, if you will, and the hierarchy that goes on. Now, in some of these situations, everybody lives through it. In other situations, they're gone and deified later and still hang on with their aspects. In other ones, someone else retakes back over, and that's the aspect that they try to give you with Baal and turning into El and so on. But when it comes back around, like when Egypt, whenever the sun comes back up tomorrow, the sun will come up tomorrow, there they are again, because in the story, which starts all over of the Baal cycle, there's El and there's Baal and Anat, which Anatolia is named after, and so on. And it all goes through again. I'll do one on the Baal cycle again. I did one a few years back. You can look in, I actually did a few videos that contain some pertinent information for it, but and some of them are debunks on the Bible because it's telling you where, they found all this stuff in Samaria and what they had found in ancient Ugarit and things that all correspond with each other. So, but it seems or an aura is a name of the sun, and that would have also been the river of the sun. We talked about in the first video how these are children of the sun. They're all sun worshiping, of course, with Ra and everything, these Caucasian blue-eyed Egyptians. But all around the Mediterranean, they're doing it too. Well, where else are they doing it? Basically everywhere. Everywhere that Mary went, that land was sure as hell to go. They're all based off sun worshiping and theogony that works off that, and the stars are put in place, and it works off ancestor veneration and where it comes from. And so this was the father and that's the son. And if you'll look, whenever you do comparative religions and things like that of pagan people, it all seems to work out just like that. Well, there's that same situation where Noah is supposed to be like Uranus and he gets castrated, and there's the curse of Ham or whatever, and he comes back out and the other kids put a thing over him, then he comes out and he curses them all, right? There's other versions of that tale where actually he saw him dead and he came back out and didn't cover him up, and the other kids, without looking, went and covered him up. There's other versions of it that go certain ways, but that just puts the same theogony. Although it's not necessarily looked as so mythologic, it tries to put it on people that didn't exist even, right? But it runs the same situation, and they say, oh, there's only one God. Well, if you look at it, the other ones boil down to that situation and aspects, and this has angels and saints for anything from a toothache to all the way down to what? So you want to talk about hundreds of, that work along with it. And then they've got a reverse of that same situation that goes with this devil. Yep, the god of the underworld and his whole theogony. And some of that is built off of the people that used to be in the other theogony and now are no longer relevant, like we're talking about, and they become the gods of the underworld. Yeah, and so you find that, Helios, the sun god of the day, has a counterpart of hell, which I just did a video about his counterpart during the night. Right? Let's go on. But as the sun god, Ausar is also a god who affects nature, and from the passage quoted from the hymn published by Reisner, it can be gathered that Ausar was in some way connected with irrigation and vegetation. Well, yeah, Osiris, he's definitely with that rebirth of the land and the whole situation that goes with spring and everything. That all goes with the sun, so you can see it. There it is right there, aspect. But here's how the poem goes. O Ausar, bestower of planting, founder of sowing, maker of grains and plants, who caused the green herb to come forth. This is from the Journal of American Oriental Societies. We talked about at the very first of the first video how his name transplants and agreed with by the Greeks that it was from afar and everything, and you can say, well, yeah, the sun, whenever it goes around, it's a range, it goes from afar, but yeah, no, Ausar came from afar. And afar, in some ancient linguistics, ends up being way out there. Yeah, in fact, if you can still hear it in Old English and stuff of afar. He comes from afar. Where is that? It's not from around here. Ausar. He came from afar. But then he's back around again, and here he goes again. And them Caucasians get around. But let's continue. There's more to this. Osiris, their great god, represented the sun in his darkened or nocturnal or ruined condition, i.e., the darkness that it shows of him, before the coming of day. So he heralds the dawn, but he was the god of the underworld. Yeah, but okay, the day, listen, it's the sun come up, moon go down, world spin round and round, right? So he heralds the day. Well, but he ends the day by bringing the night. Well, actually, the sun in its cart goes past the point you can't see anymore over the horizon. And then you can't see it anymore until it comes back up over here, right? Yeah, well, that's what happens, and he's the god of the other side of the world. Oh, so in Egypt, that would be like in America or something, the other side of the world, like China and America, or what do so he's the god of America? No, it doesn't work that way. It's a whole mystical idea of how sun come up, moon go down, world spin round and round, right? But this is from Ragnarok, the age of fire and gravel. And this was by Ignatius Donnelly and R.S. Peale in 1887. Now, what's neat about Donnelly is that he used to actually be a congressman for the United States. And I think he was going to try to run for president and stuff, but he was the guy that reignited the world, America and the world, on the idea of Atlantis. For he made a few connections and then made a book about it and started looking into all this stuff. And here he is making a connection now. Check it. Just right here in his book about Ragnarok, which is definitely in the Norse part, and we've talked about this recently. But that in that, Osiris is their great god, represented by the sun in his darkened or nocturnal or ruined condition before the coming of day. And it's just like whenever the Nile floods and kind of ruins it right there. But out of that ruin, all of a sudden, whoop, everything just pops up magically. It's like magic, isn't it? Have you ever take just a bean and you put it in a mason jar with a little bit of cotton, and then make sure you keep it moist, kind of get it in there for a couple of days. That bean will pop up, and then all of a sudden it'll start reaching up. Then it pops the rest of the little bean part off of it. That becomes the two little petals, and it shoots up another thing, and now you got a bean plant. Oh, it was so neat whenever you're a kid, and you really could actually see it grow per day. You're like, well, look at it grow. But that works in many different ways, from plants to people, etc. So this idea of Ragnarok also is connected with it, and also again from same said book, Ragnarok, the Edge of Fire, the Gravel, Ignatius Donnelly. He says Imret Bey says that the originally Osiris is the nocturnal sun. He is the primordial night of chaos, and he is subsequently anterior to Ra, the son of day. And so, look, esoterically, you can look at things a few different ways, but he can be the sun on the other side of the earth if you go with that. But where we can't see that, he's the unseen God, he's the unknowing, he's the black hole sun. It's described in some esoteric, as you're getting initiated through the ranks, that a torch is black. But if you light it, it's the only thing in the room giving out light. And our sun is the same way. Look at sunspots. They're black. Everything is on fire, though, it's emitting the light. In fact, it's emitting this light, and the very ancients believed that all of the solar system here, in fact the Milky Way, gleamed and glistened like little diamonds shimmering on a sheet of black fabric, because you were walking around holding a sun or a torch in your hand, and you can kind of see that. Well, it moves real slowly. Well, the diamonds do a little twinkle, right? Twinkle, twinkle, little star. But what's the representation for the nighttime version of the day? And it was Saturn. And so this makes that connection too. So it gets to be this envelope of onions, but hopefully y'all are hanging with me. Same book, Ragnarok, Ignatius Donnelly. Mr. Miller says, as nocturnal sun, Osiris was also regarded as a type of sun before the first rising. Heralding the dawn. Dawn of what? Dawn of man, or primordial night of chaos, and as such, according to M. Mariette, his first rising, his original birth to the light under the form of Ra, symbolized the birth of humanity itself in the person of the first man. And we know that is Adam, and we're all familiar with that. So Adam was Osiris in some ways. Well, you can find in the Greeks, there's people that make up that too, and then, of course, who make man out of clay. But ironically, hey, Inky, Ea over here, makes man out of clay. And so do these people over here. What's the deal with that? Well, it's because the formation that started this all off comes from a couple of steps back before we got any writing. Yeah, it starts to hit dead ends, and all you end up with is some symbols and symbolism. And when you start driving things out of symbolism, people are going, you're crazy. There's 3 symbols on the wall. How can you drive all that from 3 symbols on the wall whenever, it takes all these words, look at this on this piece of paper, for you to get enough out of it to say this or to say that and stuff. And it's like, well, if you look at what comes from that, you can derive that they must have had something like that going on and blah, blah, blah. And then here comes this great fight. Well, can you imagine going back 2 levels past the point of that and saying, well, everybody was hanging around doing this similar stuff and they're all sun worshippers. And I say they were doing the same stuff because regardless of this pottery being a little different than that, which means that they were separated over time and developed some style from each other, yet at the same time they were doing the same thing. It says it goes back another step, doesn't it? And it goes back another step, and there was really no verifier until we found Göbekli Tepe that it even went back another step, and all of a sudden we find that step was, man, they had it going on more than we can find for the other ages in between almost. It looks radical. All the sundial effect of itself and the things that just, it's blowing everybody's mind. Then they find out, well, we already knew there was a bunch of this here, but we thought it was from the Templars, and there's belly hills all over this place. It's like, really? And so we know of about 7. Then I've only done videos on 3 now so far, so we'll have to continue that, although some of the other ones haven't even been excavated. In fact, a couple of them, they show you, they don't really tell you exactly where it is because they don't want anybody trying to get to it, because it's not now, it's next, and that crew is working on X right now, and before they get to Y and Z, they effectively don't want somebody getting in there and ruining it. They pick the ones that look best or most promising to them, but imagine the lack of promise that there was at Göbekli Tepe before somebody dug it down to a point and went, what the hell? Also, from same book, Ragnarok, Ignatius Donnelly. M.F. Chaba says these forms represented the same god at different hours of the day, the nocturnal sun and the daily sun, which succeeded to the first, dissipated the darkness on the morning of each day, and renewed the triumph of Horus over Set. And so if we are talking about having the sun go down, and that's, we call that still in reverence, and it holds, and you go like, what? Yeah, sunset? Ever hear of one? Well, yeah, but that's supposed to be something bad having happened. No, the sunset's almost the prettiest aspect of the sun. Well, why? Well, it's going, it's dying, and but can you see the beauty in your grandparents and your parents getting old and becoming your grandparents? Hopefully so, because one day you're gonna become your parents, and then you're gonna become your grandparents, and then you are gonna go to the stars and ride the solar boat that goes around too. And I hope I meet all of you one day there. So each day it renewed this, though, but in a long and a short cycle of this triumph over Set, that is to say, the cosmical victory which determined the first rising of the sun, the organization of the universe at the commencement of time. Ra is the god who, after having marked the commencement out of time, continues each day to govern his work. He succeeds to primordial form. Osiris, the nocturnal sun, or better, the sun before at its first rising. And here I'll tell you some other gnosis right now. So in the Bible it says Cain slew Abel, and Cain tried to give him the vegetables, but Abel wanted to give him the meat. And God liked the meat more than just vegetables. And everybody says, oh, this is a transition from it. In reality, what you're looking at here is a people came in and overtook a people that were beginning farming. It was had farming going on with cattle, brought that with them, and domesticated animals. And so the only glimmer you can see left of it in the mist is the fact that it mentions that at this one time these people started preferring meat over that. People have come up with this, oh, they used to be vegetarians, lions used to eat vegetarians, nobody ever ate anybody. No. So, this first rising of sun, the organization of the universe, and the commencement of time. So now we're getting the idea of a Chronos. L, Saturn, Chronos. Ra is the god who, after having marked the commencement of time, continues each day to govern his work. He succeeds at primordial form. Osiris, the nocturnal sun, or better, the sun before its first rising. And so, in a way, the Big Bang, but in a way, before the sun ignited and started our solar system working, but in a way, just before the dawn from the night before, where we were sentient enough to have all this going on. And that first day, that by the time they are marking this, is way, way in the past. And so when was Osiris? Well, it's deified in this guy that helped to form Egypt from just before primordial Egypt, and he's one of the group leaders that was their great leader that they had deified, and they sucked it into their pantheon because of it and who he became. Right, and he was in the underworld. He was already in the stars. He was Orion the hunter. They deified him and kept hold of things that hook up to that from then on. Every time you see him smiting vile Negro troglodytes or all the different people by holding him on his head with his arm raised up and knocking him with the mace and so on, is a form of Osiris right there. So it goes together and it continues and it got stronger. But this aspect of the day rolling through, this is a good way to think about it, but I don't want anybody putting it down. So they thought the world was flat. Just stop it. Stop it. So what we have is Horus is the sunrise, and Horus is the controller of the day, really. but Ra is the eternal sun god, so it's dually complicated. In fact, they call it Kafir whenever it's noon, but noon sunrise is meant to be, they have Horus at noon, right? But then you have Set, and this is not even showing up in there, but you have Set over here, and so that sunset, and it rolls around to the underworld, and this is Osiris, which is the nocturnal sun. Is it the same sun? Well, yeah, but also you have to, well, you didn't have to, but everybody did. Isn't that a coinky dink? But everybody deified it and ends up attaching it to what ends up being aspects of what people give to Saturn as a person, and aspects they gave to the star that they gave to the aspects of that person. What a queaky diggy, right? Let's think. A lot of people do. So, sunrise, sunset, is Horus just the dawn? No, it doesn't work that way. And Ra is not necessarily just the midday sun, but he's controlling of the day, and the hours are Horus of the day. And so, he made this video to debunk this guy right here and told him that he's in denial and things because he didn't know what was going on with it. But let me finish with showing you something, I guess, a little different if I can, and see, because this guy was saying that Osiris isn't the sun and blah blah blah. I think it showed a piece of it in my other video. So let's go now back to, can I get it to react? You're not going to do it. How many minutes are we into this? 36. Could it here. Guess I'm just going to show you these Caucasian Egyptians if I can get this to come out of it. I'll just have to quit it and go back into it right after. I'm going to load it right back up. Give it 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah. If you go about that amount of time, it'll go right back to that same page. If you wait about 5, 10 more seconds, it'll go back to the very first page on the left, and you got to go all the way back over to where it is. And I've got so many articles pulled up right now, guys, to show you stuff on. Some of them are multiples where I'm using 2 or 3. Ticks me off. I found a couple of them that I was supposed to use in a video. Like even the Kraken, believe it or not, I had a whole video that was set up showing the fact that, what's this, Trump may be racist, and they're trying to, and this is literally a, CNN, and they're gonna, and so their topic of the night is Trump may be racist, discuss. Isn't that disgusting? They're supposed to be non-biased and just the news, and you figure it all out. Oh, that crap ended a long time ago. So here's one on the Disciples of Horus, and we could go there, but here I want to show you, here's a couple of pictures of some important people in Egyptian history. We're looking for, seriously? Look at how many things I got pulled open for y'all. It's sick. So here's some of the earliest Egyptian scribes that they had, and the neat aspect of this is that these had these inset eyes that are crystal, but they have an inset pocket which they drilled out, which that's weird. But then the crystal being able to make a beveled real crystal eye that's blue, so these blue-eyed Caucasian Egyptians here, these are earliest scribes. In fact, this is just known as the seated scribe. Now they figured out which one he is out of a group of a bunch of them, but these eyes are seen. There's another aspect of the same one. They even did these in some of the earliest cats and so on, and Horaha, which is supposed to be like the second pharaoh ever. And this kind of shows you this effect where you can see the blue turning on in this eye, but this one isn't yet. As you walk over at certain points in the room, his eyes turn real blue, and when you get faced onto them, they're real blue. And again, they look so natural. It's like following you around the room. See if they got another picture of it. No, they don't got another picture of it. So let's. That's the earliest of dynasties too. That guy's just supposed to be wedged between the fourth and fifth dynasties and carry it on. And some other important aspects, I guess, over time right here. So this is the great grandfather of King Tutankhamen. He has blonde hair, and people have said, "Oh, that happened from the natron bleaching and stuff." And you go, "Well, how come these people have black hair? These people have blonde or chestnut hair. These people have blonde. These people have red hair," and so on. And when they've looked under a microscope, they go, "No, he was a redhead. Ramses was a redhead, even though it turned gray. He was a redhead in his youth." They can tell under a microscope. Those scientists, they're just incredible. But also, you can tell this is slightly curly, straight Caucasian blonde hair, and nothing can affect that. Hell, he looks like Abraham Lincoln. And here's the CAT scan of his wife. Shows you in her hair that's here onto it. Now she has a little bit of that overbite, just like King Tut. And so this is Thuya and Yuya, right? And this is Thuya, the male, and Yuya. They don't have a picture over there. And they even show things like prognathism in skulls. And so if you just look at a skull, what would things look like? And who would they end up being? Oh, how much time do I got? One more thing. Let's go this way. No. Let's go back and I'll show you what Yuya, his wife, looks like other than the CAT scan that just showed you right there. I've done this in a couple of videos here not too long ago, but hey, why not? So there is Yuya. So we saw Thuya, and there's his wife Yuya, and they're the great-grandparents of King Tutankhamen, and the grandparents of Akhenaten, Queen Tai, and that whole mess that goes on there. Regardless of what tries to get told to you, that lady there has blonde hair too. She's a Caucasian. Why do they have dark skin? When they turn them to beef jerky, what happens to beef, and what does it look like? Well, on the walls, yeah, on the walls they have red ochre males and pale females, and you can find that exact same depiction in Mitanni, Greek, Minoan, Etruscan art from all over the area. Red ochre symbology goes back through Cro-Magnon times and Cro-Magnon burials and art all over cave walls everywhere. You've seen all of that. So there's another little close-up of it, and you can see that curly hair. And ironically, in the British Museum, there's a mummy that looks just about like this, called Ginger, but it's a male. He's got blonde curly hair like that, and he's a pre-dynastic Gimbeline mummy from the time before the Egyptians even got together in armor. And he also is a pale blonde-haired man, or strawberry blondish hair. They try to refer to it, but if you look at it, it looks kind of golden blonde like this in some ways. So anyhow, like, share, and subscribe, guys, and enjoy. And there's some, hopefully I made some connections for you on the Osiris, Ausar, and how that hooks up to a lot of people's names that you probably didn't think that it hooked up. Peace.